Well, welcome at mine as well. It's lovely to see you all and to share this moment of succession today. And I hope that what I'm going to say will speak to some of the points that have already been raised. We'll recognize some of those, some of them. So I'm afraid, yes, the idea of lectures and group relations is problematic for me too. And so I'm going to read my paper, and we've got limited time, so I'm going to try and make it a little easier by showing up on the screen some of the propositions that I'm making about group relations as we come to them. So as I was preparing this talk, a different title came to me to the one advertised, that is, People, Places and Propositions. Because reviewing my writing, I became aware that my experiences as director of the Group Relations Program were all about people, they were about places, and about propositions. I'm reminded of the TED talk by Ken Robinson, the educator, who said that in organizational life, our bodies serve mainly one purpose, and that is to transport half of our brain, the half that tilts to the left, from one meeting to the next. So my first proposition is that group relations invests in the whole person, the left brain, the right brain, and the viscera. The human spirit, imagination, thought, emotion, feelings, fantasies, myths, legends, and stories, and the basic human drive for relations. My experience of group relations is the emergence of all these aspects of people, finding the fullest expression of the personality, the creative, often suppressed side of the self, in order to enjoy greater freedom to think, to experience, and to choose, and to abandon slavish adherence to unproductive ways of thinking and being. Proposition 2, that in pursuit of freedom of expression, of choice, of finding everyone's full potential, group relations extends its concerns to social institutions to release and promote human capacity for creative living and a positive contribution to society by all. In my director role, I benefited hugely from many colleagues and friends. Firstly, there were Ann Kutek and Anton Obholzer, who separately asked me one day, why don't you apply for the director job? I was somewhat bowled over by this. Eric Miller had figured so hugely for me that I simply had not considered applying. But I applied, and I was interviewed by John Kelleher and Richard Holty. They asked me to see Olya Khalili and Tim Dartington, who were assisting in the selection process. And I got the job. That was the beginning of a fabulous and exciting personal and professional journey with the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations that enabled me to be as maverick as the Institute itself. As a white Jewish South African, I found I was inevitably a boundary person, belonging neither here nor there, just like the Institute, which is independent of funders or political sponsors and claims the right to investigate and speak out loudly in any area of human functioning. It was beyond my comprehension that I could possibly follow the great and adored Eric Miller. And yet there was also some logic to my appointment that escaped me at the time. Namely, that twice I had had a positive experience of being a client of Eric's consultancy. And more, Eric had been my mentor in group relations for 3 years, during which we worked together, developing relationships with our Israeli colleagues, who later formed the OFEC organization, and with our South African friends in the development of ISLA, the group relations organization there. Nevertheless, I could not get out of my mind that I would be walking in the footsteps of a giant, and it was impertinent of me to think I could follow him in this role. So in this talk, in addition to acknowledging Eric's contribution to my development, I wish to pay tribute to some of my forebears, like Pierre Turquet, Robert Gosling, and Mary Barker at the Tavistock Clinic, where I also once worked, and to Isabel Mendes Lythe and Gordon Lawrence at the Tavistock Institute, who inspired me by their devotion to this type of work and in the way they generated and shaped system psychodynamics in group relations. I was forever impressed by their framing perspectives of organizational and social systems thinking, combined with psychoanalytic perspectives on individual mental processes and group and social dynamics. My appointment created consternation in the world of group relations. Who was this chap? And where did he come from? The A.K. Rice Institute in America were apparently so concerned, they sent Bernie Gertler over from New York to investigate me. His conclusion was, I'm happy to say, how could they appoint someone who was warm? Why was this even a question, I wondered? Was the picture of group relations so austere and humorless, so ingrained in Vion's ideas of no memory and no desire? I was full of barely manageable desire for using group relations to transform social, political, and economic problems. At times, I barely recognized myself as this evangelical person wishing to set the world alight with group relations insights in order to produce a better world by using research and practical engagement to resolve social and political conflict, violence, poverty, ill health, criminal justice, and education. Perhaps the Institute, too, could not contemplate anyone replacing Eric Miller. After all, it took 2 years to find his replacement. And perhaps because of the Institute's fear of me failing, I was kept on a tight leash for the first few years. John Margison, the then company secretary, once told me, "You are the most monitored person at this institute." I understood this better when I was asked to raise the Leicester Conference fees by 25%, when previous increases had been of the order of about 4 or 5%. I extracted a concession to increase the fee by a mere 20%. Agreed, they said. Amazing, Anton said, and about time too. And so we waited to see how the market would react. A small dip and conference membership rising year on year. Rita Friend, the group relations administrator at the time, suggested a world tour. Get to know, she said, the group relations institutions. Share your vision of group relations with them and listen to what they have to say. So I visited Washington, New York, Boston, Johannesburg, Stockholm, Tel Aviv, and Jerusalem. That was in the first years. Erica, I visited Lithuania too a number of times, but that came later. From these visits, I saw how important group relations is for people around the world. They seemed to have a kind of love affair with group relations, which was, of course, also suffused with jealousy, competition, and betrayal. It seemed group relations in places was in danger of becoming a personal possession, or a family business, as Olya would say. Talking about family business, Leonie, my wife, has been to group relations conferences, and my son Danny, our son Danny, has worked on group relations conferences in Israel. But it was also at risk, group relations was at risk of becoming inward-looking and potentially losing sight of its social role of addressing the problems of communities and of society. Group relations unquestionably had the ability to draw on my messianic fantasies and proselytizing impulses. I have this insight and I'm bringing it to you. No, was this ever such a bad motive, I wonder? If we have something good, do we not have a desire and a responsibility for sharing it with others? Don't we often see the B members in sub-conferences at Leicester conflicted over whether to share their previous conference experience for fear of being criticized, for looking backwards and avoiding the here and now? I certainly had savior fantasies in bringing group relations to Israel in 1983, unself-consciously walking into the American Embassy, the Israeli Liberal Party, and even Hamas, to persuade them to engage in a group relations conference. They were very interested, actually, although it never happened, but they were interested, and we talked. I was convinced then, and I remain convinced now, that group relations has the potential to be a major instrument of social inquiry and a powerful means for bringing about change. Proposition 3, that all human interaction is a form of group relations. That might refer to your geopolitical comment earlier. Proposition 4, that insight into conscious and unconscious dynamics of groups is a prerequisite if we want our social and political institutions to do better. Proposition 5, that group relations is the best medium for the effective integration of two dominant knowledge systems, the psychosocial and the technico-economic. Group relations based on Tavistock system psychodynamics models can be described as, quote, socio-technical systems informed by psychoanalytical perspectives that illuminate conscious, unconscious processes in individuals, groups, and organizations, and in the physical and social environments in which they are located. Group relations showed me that a meaningful integration of the most important theories and practices of the so-called Tavistock tradition was possible. Psychoanalysis, the role of thought; socio-technical systems, the interaction between people and technology; and theories of leadership, participant design, and greater democratization of the workplace. Group relations deepened my conviction of the ubiquitous presence of anxieties and the mobilization of social defense systems against them, a set of inspired ideas that have defined the Tavistock social science research methodologies, organizational change initiatives, and executive coaching encounters for nearly a century. In my group relations role, I discovered again and again how system psychodynamics concepts benefits its users and the social good. In particular, I was in awe of how system psychodynamics enables understanding of beneath the surface forces in systems that has the potential for promoting significant an observable improvement in behavior and performance. Central to me is the use of open systems theory that claims that organisms exist and survive only through continuous interaction with their environments. This idea, allied to the significance of boundaries and their management and the role of leadership as a boundary functioning, of a boundary function mediating between inside and outside. Proposition 6, that group relations work relies on group defenses against unconscious anxieties, making group membership a channel for projections that distort the group task through defensive needs. Another strand of my approach to group relations rests on the theories of infant development and its influence on adult life and relationships, especially the Kleinian view that the infant instinctively seeks pleasure and comfort and avoids pain and polarizes its world accordingly. For the infant, discovering that the good and the bad are manifestations of the same person is a source of anxiety that is defended against and remains a permanent part of psychic life in adulthood in the form of guilt, feelings of guilt, reparation, and the search for love. Proposition 7, that basic assumptions interfere with group effectiveness and group relations helps increase our understanding of resistance to change. That uncertainty and ambiguity of the learning task in group relations makes groups vulnerable to basic assumption disturbance. Hence, definition of the primary task is critical to any group relations conference design. In my approach to group relations conference work, I am influenced by Bion's ideas that every group operates at least on 2 levels simultaneously. A work group that is engaged rationally in pursuit of a task, and a basic assumption group in pursuit of one of 3 primitive basic assumptions: dependency, fight, flight, and pairing, or pairing. These theories show us how the inherent groupishness of human beings turns groups into vehicles for satisfaction of primitive, instinctive drives for survival, pleasure-seeking, and pain avoidance. Bion's interest in pushing further into the primitive of the group was extended by his colleagues at the Tavistock Institute, working in particular on the challenge of memory and desire, to the very human wish that everything should revert to the status quo ante. Elaborating and working through the obstacles to group and organizational learning forms the basis of much of the work of the Tavistock enterprise. Proposition 8, that the director of the group relations program is subject to transference, becoming a screen onto which group relations organizations around the world project unconscious wishes and frustrations. Conversely, the director experiences counter-transference feelings and has the experience of becoming a fantasized character in the group relations organization's internal dramas. Welcome to the role of president.
Changes everything.
I didn't notice it.
In group relations, the work is an ongoing collaboration in which the staff team and the conference membership work together in gaining a deeper understanding of the conference as a temporary learning system and its subsystems through the development of testable hypotheses that may influence possible courses of action. In group relations work, consultants are faced with persistent obstacles to learning called resistance. I have learned that conference staff and the groups they consult to are partners in the process of group learning and group resistance, which they have to address jointly in order to generate ongoing learning. We need to avoid the trap of thinking that our learning is complete and it's only the members who are here to learn. Proposition 9, that interdependence and collaboration, communication and uncertainty lie at the heart of group relations in the Tavistock tradition, and so is our commitment to the production of new knowledge and its application. Okay, I'm just checking the time. I see we've got 15 minutes left. So, okay. The history of the Tavistock Institute as a not-for-profit organization means that the new knowledge generated by the Institute is available for all. The Articles of Association of the Institute state, quote, "The objects for which the Tavistock Association is established are specifically restricted to advance the study of the psychosociology of relations in the widest possible sense of the word, between human beings and groups or classes or categories of human beings, and of the influence of environment in all its aspects on the formation or development of human character or capacity, to conduct research and experiment for this purpose, and to publish the results of such study, research and experiment for this purpose, and to train students in and for any branches of the said study. Group relations, I believe, has remained true to these original purposes of the Institute." I introduce this definition of aims here to underline the Tavistock Institute's distinctive mission and to point out the Institute's strong link to psychoanalysis and to general systems theories. These theories have impacted hugely on group relations. Through group relations, I have attempted to bring coherence to knowledge of unconscious dynamics and cognitive and intellectual capability in order to raise human potential for creative, collective endeavor. Oh, what's that? Proposition 10, that group relations conferences are influenced by their social context. In different countries, wider social phenomena like culture, politics, economics, religion, and history influence group and individual behavior. This observation reinforces the multidisciplinary nature of group relations, involving people from widely different fields of study and professions, who together constantly seek improvement. For this reason, we avoid institutionalizing the training of group relations work. Proposition 11, that it is pointless pushing people or systems to change when they have reason to be resistant. Not all resistance is negative. A capacity to wait is a strong virtue in our kind of work, and is more likely to lead to growth and development than control or pressure. The notion of the safe space, Bion's idea of containment, Winnicott's idea of the holding environment, are vital requirements for experiential learning that can lead to a more tolerant acceptance of anxieties and surviving them, and the competitive and sometimes hostile projections swirling about in members and in staff in group relations conferences. Proposition 12, that there will always be tension between the academe and experiential learning. This topic always troubled me and presented a challenge that needed attending. What would be the requisite level of institutionalizing group relations without compromising its core essence of learning from experience? Would the training of consultants have to be structured and monitored and evaluated like other academic and professional programs? What would we do about those training elements that are unique to a Tavistock orientation and which makes it different from other group-based trainings? How could Tavistock group relations be prevented from being straight-jacketed and would allow it to, nevertheless, to reflect changing conditions and circumstances of organizations and society at large? In other words, how would group relations maintain its relevance to its users? How would it continue to be innovative and avoid becoming a closed conformist system? These questions prompted Avi Nutkovich of OFEC in Israel and me to set up the first Belgerati conference on group relations conferences in 2003, and since then held every 3 years, each conference producing a book of the papers presented. A cursory look at the 5 volumes so far reveals how wide group relations as a method extends and how it has been adapted and applied to so many fields. The 6th Belgerati conference will be taking place this coming November. There comes a point when people and events converge to change the direction of history. For nearly 10 years of my tenure, I was more or less alone in group relations at the Tavistock Institute. There were people like Karen Izod and Angela Eden who came alongside in 2001 and with whom I worked as a team for about 5 years. Others joined the Group Relations Advisory Panel, people like Tim Dartington, Fedi Abraham, Olya Khalili, David Armstrong, Jonathan Gosling, Wesley Carr, Frank Heller, and Anton Obholzer, who gave of their time and their wisdom, and importantly gave the group relations program a growing body and a sense of substance here at the Institute. Rachel stepped into the administrator role for group relations and eventually became the regular administrator at the Leicester conferences. It was a good time for group relations then to have Rachel here. She contributed magnificently from the administrator role to understanding conference dynamics. She attended conferences in many countries and presented a paper on the role of the administrator in group relations. Kathy White from New York sat on the Group Relations Advisory Panel, and from that distance offered her keen support, insights, and asked sharp questions about group relations work at the Institute. Changes at the Tavistock Institute saw Phil Swan appointed as the first CEO, and to him I owe a number of things. Firstly, his startling question about why group relations was so buried at the Institute that he only discovered its existence during his interviews for the job. He introduced group relations to local government, where it enjoyed a few years of interest with local government officers and members. Phil's most important contribution was spotting the unique talents of Eliat Aram, ensuring that she should have a place here on the staff at the Tavistock Institute. With Eliat's appointment, the group relations team and its activities took off, offering group relations and consultancy work to areas that had not till then been part of our usual domain. It was an exciting time because of discovering what was possible. a creative explosion of ideas, techniques, and approaches. The world became our oyster. Nothing was impossible. Projects covered the world. The system psychodynamics paradigm and group relations conferences flourished. With stridency and even a little arrogance, group relations took its place as partners with academia, with partnerships and social movements, like the social protest movement at one extreme and the commercial and manufacturing parts of the British and European Union economy on the other. Proposition 13, that organizational role consultation for people in positions of responsibility is essential. Not a luxury, but essential. In my view, anyone working with human dynamics should have regular oversight of their work with someone more experienced and advanced than themselves. Soon after my appointment, I asked Eric Miller to recommend a consultant to me for organizational role consultation. He recommended Ralph Wolf, who has been my role consultant for these past 20 years. Working with Ralph is a valuable and enriching experience, resulting in deeper insights into my own behavior in my role, and importantly, leading to operational and strategic changes at the Institute. During the past 20 years, I've had the privilege of participating in remarkable seminars and lectures here, a program of lectures and seminars established and organized by Juliet Scott, a series of visionary talks on the role of the Tavistock in engaging with the individual, with the community, and worldwide challenges. I was then, and I am now, a firm believer that experiential learning is the best basis for people and society to effect change. Our group relations makes it possible to take risks, to face one's limitations, and rely more on the generative power of groups. As my colleague Leslie says to inquirers when they ask, if your choice is between doing a PhD or coming to Leicester, come to Leicester. Today, we have a large team of group relations people who design, direct, consult, and administer group relations conferences on themes, different themes in exciting places. Take a look at the brochures to get a glimpse of that. The work is never complete, but nevertheless, I look back with a deep sense of satisfaction at how I've journeyed from my time when group relations at the Institute sat on a rather shaky foundation to today, when a team of group relations people brings group relations experience and thinking to thousands of people. What is attending a group relations conference? I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump because it's past my time. You manage? Okay. Okay, now it's two more pages. Okay. What does attending a group relations conference do to one? I recall a conversation in 1974 with my then supervisor, Dr. Bob Gosling, soon after attending my first Leicester conference, who said to me that he supposed my way of thinking about my group of patients would have been changed forever by my Leicester experience. I replied, indeed it had. Later, when I directed the Leicester conference for the first time, Dr. Gosling encouraged me to be as open as possible about the swirling dynamics of the conference and to use my feelings stirred up by the chaos to deepen my understanding of those dynamics and to find ways of sharing that understanding with the staff group. I kept a daily diary during that conference which reveals the power of the projections that the membership and staff have to grapple with, and how these projections get sent upwards in the hope that they will be somehow dealt with up there. I'm grateful to have found a home in group relations, where I can work with the constructs of transference and countertransference, splitting, projection and projective identification, the group unconscious, Oedipal conflicts, leadership, power and authority in a group and organizational setting. I'm hugely awed by the potentially destabilizing unconscious dynamics in groups and intergroup relations, where group members' feelings and emotions sometimes overwhelm the group task and raise anxieties over the individual search for safety and security. Group relations conference thinking can also be useful outside of conferences. Proposition 14, that without the understandings that come from group relations, the organization's capacity to learn gives way to blame, punishment, and exclusion. I realize the huge impact group relations has on me in my work with organizations. I survey, diagnose, and consult to organizations as entities made up of forming and reforming of small groups, or in our language, subsystems, moving about the organizational environment like expanding and contracting amoeba, never still for a moment, and each of them containing the organization's DNA, its values and its objectives. I also appreciate that managing these constantly changing groups requires unique leadership qualities, flexibility, innovation, and respect for abstractions like dynamics, notions of group mentality. Like the client who said to me recently while we discussed the formation of action learning groups, he said, "I don't expect full success. Of our 6 action learning groups, I expect 1 to be exceptional, 2 to be good, 2 to be mediocre, and 1 to fail." And that's how it turned out. Importantly, sufficient learning had occurred for most people to see that in all the action learning sets, including the exceptional one and the failed, that they held projections of success and failure on behalf of the total system. That no matter how painful the failed subsystem felt, they were not to be blamed. But instead, the organizational system understood that failure could be mitigated by taking back what had been projected into the failed group. All right, never mind, no more. By the mid-1960s, the basic design of the Tavistock Group Relations Conferences had been established by the early pioneers. Despite numerous adaptations and innovations to group relations conference design, the group relations program continued to be criticized for being intellectual, authoritarian, and anachronistic. Despite regular changes to conference theme and design, the perception remained of a Tavistock fixed in old paradigms. The persistence of this projection was explained by Tim Dartington, that the next generation of group relations practitioners seems to need to retain an image of a so-called old Tavistock so that their innovations can be progressed without experiencing the feelings of guilt that often accompanies altering or abandoning a tradition. Therefore, the Tavistock's vigorous leadership in this field, its vitality and innovation in group relations has to be denied. And we have to live with that. Once I was interviewed by 2 researchers. They asked me what I'd like to be remembered for as director of the group relations program. I said that I would like to be remembered for emphasizing the relationship of knowledge that is developed in group relations work and its application to the individual self and to organizations and to society. I've worked to distance the conference as a quasi-therapeutic experience. I said I would like to be remembered for introducing research into group relations, that group relations should take its place as a scientific method of inquiry and be debated and criticized from a research standpoint. I'd like to be remembered as having ignited love and enthusiasm for group relations learning. And finally, I would like to say how thrilled I am that Leslie will henceforth fill the role of director of this program. We have worked together for many years in a work we love, and I look forward to continuing our collaboration. Leslie, I wish you every good fortune as you take group relations forward. Okay. You also read the rest yourself.